12 Israeli agents landed in India under a veil of absolute secrecy. They arrived without fanfare, without press, and without any traceable documentation the public would ever see. Their mission was classified at the highest levels, obscured even from the usual diplomatic whispers that occasionally leak into the press. Why were they here? Why would a country like Israel, known for its surgical precision in intelligence operations, send an entire team of operatives into one of the most complex, layered geopolitical landscapes in the world? The answer, while still shrouded in mystery, likely lies at the intersection of national security, international espionage, and covert agendas that transcend public policy. When intelligence operatives are deployed in such numbers, it signals urgency, not routine surveillance. Not liaison work, this was something else. The very deployment of 12 field agents boots on the ground, not analysts behind screens, suggests the operation was expected to be intense, fast, moving, and possibly hostile. India isn't new to international intelligence collaborations, especially with nations like Israel. The two have cooperated in defense, cyber operations, and counterterrorism efforts for decades. But even within such a strong alliance, certain things are not shared. Certain missions bypass the formalities of government-to-government cooperation. Certain tasks demand absolute deniability. The story doesn't begin with what happened to the agents. It begins with the question of why they came at all. Some speculate they were tracking an international arms ring operating through South Asia. Others suggest it had to do with sabotage plans originating from hostile neighboring countries, using Indian soil as an unintended springboard. There's even talk of something darker: internal Mossad politics, dissident agents, or perhaps a breakaway faction attempting something so dangerous that it could not be known, not even to their own people. And yet, despite all these possibilities, there is no official confirmation of their presence. No airport manifests, no diplomatic back channels speaking out. It's like they were ghosts before they even vanished. This leads to a disturbing possibility. The mission itself was never supposed to be documented. These agents, it seems, were sent with no intention of return, not necessarily because the mission was suicidal, but because the trace they left behind had to be zero. No digital footprint, no surveillance footage, no paper trail. Just 12 men and women dropped into one of the world's most populous countries, on a mission nobody will admit ever happened. What sort of threat or opportunity warrants that kind of silence? It's not just about espionage. It's about what kind of operation would justify risking not just the lives of agents, but the diplomatic stability between two powerful allies. Think about that. If they were caught, or if things went wrong, as they clearly did, the implications would be catastrophic. Yet someone greenlit it. Someone, somewhere in the intelligence hierarchy, decided the potential gain outweighed the massive risk. That level of confidence or desperation only arises when something critical is on the line. And while we speculate, one thing is clear: they didn't come for surveillance alone. Surveillance doesn't need 12 agents. Surveillance doesn't require this kind of coordinated, deep cover. You don't send a team of that size into a friendly nation unless you're planning to disrupt something, extract someone, or neutralize a very specific target. Or perhaps all three. There's a chilling reality in this kind of story. When intelligence operations move this far off the books, they're no longer answerable to anyone. Not to governments, not to oversight committees, not to the people. Missions like these are designed for plausibility, not transparency. They operate in an unacknowledged world where failure means total erasure, not just of the agents themselves, but of the operation's very existence. That, tragically, may be what happened here, and so we come back to the question: why were they sent? The simplest explanation is usually the most disturbing. They were sent because something or someone in India was deemed a high enough threat or prize to warrant full denial and full risk. That target could have been a rogue nuclear scientist, an arms dealer shielded by local power, or a potential double agent hiding in plain sight. It could have been a ghost from the past, someone long thought dead, whose sudden appearance threatened to disrupt decades of carefully buried secrets. Whatever the reason, it was enough to mobilize 12 of the most elite operatives from one of the world's most formidable intelligence agencies. And now 11 are gone. The world may never know who they were or what their mission was, but the silence surrounding their disappearance speaks louder than any official statement ever could. They landed in India, and then, almost as if swallowed by the air itself, 11 of them vanished. No farewell signals, no distress calls, no surveillance footage worth anything. Just one agent left behind and silence surrounding the rest. In the world of intelligence, silence can be strategic. But this was something else. This was a disappearance that defies protocol, logic, and even belief. Because these were not tourists or diplomats. These were trained operatives, professionals whose entire existence revolves around avoiding detection, evading capture, and surviving hostile environments. And yet, 11 of them disappeared without a trace. Disappearances happen in the intelligence world, but not like this. Not in a coordinated group, not in a country like India with one of the densest networks of surveillance, human and electronic, on the planet. You don't just lose 11 foreign agents unless someone, some force, wanted them gone and knew exactly how to make it happen. It's this calculated vanishing that makes the whole story so chilling. It's not just what happened, it's how cleanly it was done. No loose ends, no leaks, no bodies, nothing. And here's what makes it even more terrifying. If these agents were compromised by a rival service, say, a hostile intelligence outfit operating in South Asia, then we're talking about a level of penetration and efficiency that would be an intelligence earthquake. To take down 11 Mossad agents in foreign territory without triggering a global diplomatic incident suggests one of two things. Either the operation was allowed to happen, or it was done so flawlessly that no one was in a position to intervene. Either way, it's a message. A silent one, yes, but unmistakably loud to those who know how to listen. There are, of course, theories. Some believe the agents never made it past their initial staging area. That whatever they were sent to find, whoever they were sent to confront, was waiting for them. Others think they split into smaller cells, and that the disappearance wasn't a single event, but a cascade of separate failures that played out in different locations over several days. A few go further, suggesting betrayal from within, one agent turning on the rest, feeding intel to another power, using the mission itself as bait, and yet there's that one survivor, one person still alive, still present. But silent, perhaps under protection, perhaps in custody, perhaps unwilling or unable to speak. That lone presence makes the whole thing even more unsettling, because one surviving agent in a situation like this is rarely just a lucky exception. In intelligence, there are no coincidences that large. That agent either escaped something horrific or was never meant to disappear in the first place, and that opens a different door entirely. If the survivor was part of the mission's failure, either directly or indirectly, then what we're looking at might not be a disappearance, but an extraction. Not a vanishing, but a cleansing. 11 agents removed because the mission failed, because something went catastrophically wrong, and one left alive either as a witness or a variable. Some will argue that maybe the agents were simply captured. Maybe they're being held in some black site or underground facility far from the public eye. That they are alive, just inaccessible, but that theory falls apart under scrutiny, because if they were captured, someone would be using them, either for leverage, intelligence, or negotiation. But no such signals have emerged, no demands, no threats, no covert pressure applied to Israel or India. Just silence. That's not how capture works. That's how erasure works. This kind of vanishing speaks to a level of precision that goes beyond any ordinary failure. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional, clean, controlled. 11 operatives gone, not one trace of digital or physical evidence. Think about that. In a world wired with satellite imaging, traffic cameras, facial recognition, biometrics, metadata triangulation, how do 11 highly trained individuals simply vanish? There are only two answers. Either someone on the inside dismantled their operational security, or they walked into a trap more perfect than anyone could imagine. And so the question begins to shift, not just what happened to them, but why it was done this way, why no traces were left, why no one has claimed responsibility. In a normal covert op, even disaster leaves behind pieces to assemble. Here, the absence is the message, the silence is the clue. Someone wanted to erase these agents in a way that would rattle the very agencies that sent them. Not just eliminate them, but make their absence itself a puzzle, an untraceable cipher designed to humiliate, intimidate, or warn. Whatever the mission was, whatever they were here to do, someone knew. Someone was ready, and someone made sure the world wouldn't know the full story. That kind of operation is not an accident. It's a statement. A message meant for the highest echelons of power, whispered not in words, but in the sudden, surgical disappearance of 11 of the most skilled operatives in the world. There's something uniquely unsettling about a disappearance involving 12 people, 12 trained operatives, and only one comes back. Or rather, one is left, the lone survivor, the only remaining thread in a web that's been otherwise burned, shredded, erased. In the world of covert operations, survivors are not always seen as heroes. Sometimes they are the most dangerous person in the story. Because they know, they saw, they lived through whatever happened out there, and they might be the only one left who carries the truth. But the most haunting part, that surviving agent hasn't spoken, no press conference, no leaked testimony, not even anonymous whispers from behind closed doors, nothing. And in intelligence, silence isn't always about fear. Sometimes it's about control, because that agent is either under intense protection or under intense suspicion. Maybe both. In some circles, being the only one who makes it back from a failed mission doesn't raise sympathy, it raises alarms. You have to ask why this one, why only one, was this agent spared by design? Did they escape while the others didn't? Were they even meant to be part of the outcome? That's what people inside the agencies are probably asking right now. In rooms where no phones are allowed and every conversation is sealed behind a dozen layers of clearance, the questions are brutal. Did this agent know something? Did they do something? Did they make a choice that led to the other 11 disappearing? Or were they the bait? There's always the possibility, uncomfortable as it is, that the agent was compromised before the mission even began. If so, their survival might not be accidental at all. It might be the result of coordination with another power, another agenda. That would change everything. It would mean the mission was sabotaged from the inside, that the vanishing of 11 operatives wasn't a disaster. It was a calculated betrayal. And if that's true, the lone survivor isn't just a witness, they're a fulcrum. The entire story might hinge on what they did or didn't do. But maybe it wasn't betrayal. Maybe they were the only one who saw what was coming and got out. The last person to break from the group, to slip into the shadows just before the trap closed. If that's the case, then they might be carrying knowledge that could shake the foundations of the agencies that sent them. And yet, still, no word, which suggests either they're too damaged to speak, or too valuable to be allowed to. It's even possible that this survivor has no memory of what happened. It wouldn't be the first time agents have returned psychologically shattered, deliberately broken through isolation, drugging, or deep interrogation. Maybe they were meant to survive, but not as a person, only as a symbol, a warning. Imagine that, someone sent back not as a source of answers, but as a sign that questions should stop being asked. That's how psychological warfare works in the world of shadows. It doesn't always aim to destroy. Sometimes it aims to confuse, to paralyze, to dominate from within. Or maybe this agent knows exactly what happened. Maybe they've chosen not to speak because telling the truth would mean destroying lives, careers, alliances, reputations. It would mean exposing the mission for what it really was. Something too dangerous, too illegal, too reckless to ever be made public. And maybe, just maybe, they're being protected not for their safety, but for the safety of the story. Because if they talked, the entire cover would collapse, and some secrets are considered too big to reveal, even to the people funding the operations. There's also a more terrifying angle. What if they're talking, just not to us? What if they're debriefing in some underground chamber far from the reach of public eyes, and the information they're giving is already being acted upon? What if the story we think ended with 11 agents disappearing has only just begun? Because when the silence is this loud, it usually means more than just fear. It means planning, countermoves, a second phase of something deeper, wider, more dangerous. And in all of this, the survivor remains a cipher. Not a person, but a question. A living question that no one wants to answer publicly, because doing so would mean acknowledging how little control anyone truly had over this operation. It would mean revealing just how high the stakes were, and how completely the mission failed, or succeeded in some darker, undisclosed way. So, the one who came back, they're not the end of the story. They're its most explosive chapter, and whether they speak or not, their presence alone changes everything. India's role in this unfolding mystery is perhaps the most complex and least understood. On paper, India and Israel are strategic partners. They share intelligence, cooperate on counterterrorism, and have maintained a quiet but deepening relationship behind the scenes. So, when 12 Israeli agents entered India, it raises an uncomfortable question. Did India know? Were its intelligence agencies informed? Or did this operation unfold beneath their radar, slipping past the vast network of Indian counterintelligence, unnoticed by one of the most surveillance-heavy nations in the world? It's hard to believe that 12 highly trained foreign operatives could move through India without anyone noticing. India's internal security apparatus, especially agencies like RAW and IB, is far from inattentive. And let's be clear, India is no stranger to foreign intelligence operating on its soil. It has played host to and countered agents from every major power. So, if 11 agents disappeared and one remains, and no official statement has been made, there are only a few possible explanations. Either India was completely unaware, unlikely, or India knew and allowed it to happen, or worse, India knew and was involved. But let's start with the first possibility, that India had no idea these agents were here. If that's true, it would suggest an alarming breach of national security. It would mean one of its closest intelligence partners conducted a full-scale operation on Indian territory without coordination or consent. That kind of action isn't just a diplomatic insult, it's a provocation. It signals mistrust, it says, we don't need to tell you what we're doing, even in your own country. And if 11 of those agents then vanished, India would be left scrambling to understand what had happened on its own soil, with no information and no leverage. But that version doesn't hold up under scrutiny for very long. India's cities are among the most watched in the world. Its airports, borders, and telecom infrastructure are layered with surveillance. You can't quietly move 12 foreign nationals through multiple cities without triggering some kind of alert. Unless, of course, someone inside made sure the alerts never sounded. Which brings us to the second, more plausible scenario. India knew. Maybe not the full picture, but enough to let them move. If that's the case, then we enter murkier territory. Because if India was aware of the mission and allowed it to proceed, then it must have had something to gain. Intelligence cooperation is always transactional. One hand washes the other. So what was India's interest in this operation? Was it a shared target, a joint sting, or was India simply providing quiet logistical support while letting Israel handle the dirty work? Whatever the arrangement, something clearly went wrong. And since the disappearance, India has maintained an absolute wall of silence. No leaks, no anonymous briefings, no denials, nothing. And that silence speaks volumes. If the mission was unilateral and unsanctioned, India would be furious. It would want to distance itself. There would be subtle messages sent through the media, quiet corrections of the record. But instead, there's been an eerie calm, no disavowal, no narrative correction, just nothing. That leads us to the third, and most unsettling, possibility, that India wasn't just aware that it was involved. If India's agencies were active participants in this mission, then the disappearance of the agents becomes something entirely different. It becomes an internal operation that failed, or worse, it becomes a joint operation that was intentionally disrupted by a third force or by India itself. And that opens a door no one wants to walk through, because it would mean India either betrayed its Israeli partners or lost control of an operation on its own turf. Both outcomes are disastrous, both diplomatically and operationally. And here's another layer to consider. If India was involved, then the survivor, the one agent who didn't vanish, might not be in Israeli custody at all. They might be in India's hands, being questioned, protected, or silenced. It depends entirely on what they know. And that possibility, that the survivor is being held by a partner who suddenly became a liability, changes the entire story. Because now, it's not just about missing agents, it's about shifting alliances, trust unraveling in real time. A silent fracture between two countries that once shared secrets, and now might be hiding them from each other. We also have to ask, what does India stand to gain by saying nothing? In politics, silence is never free. Silence is bought, traded, used. If India is keeping quiet, it may be because they're holding leverage, or protecting themselves from fallout, or negotiating behind the scenes. Because if word got out that 11 foreign agents disappeared on Indian soil, agents from a supposed ally, there would be consequences. Questions from the press, pressure from foreign governments, an erosion of confidence in India's intelligence capabilities. Silence then becomes a shield, not just to protect secrets, but to protect power. So whether India was complicit, betrayed, or blindsided, one thing is certain: their silence is not passive. It is deliberate. It is part of the operation itself. And in a story where 11 agents vanish and one remains, India's role is not a footnote. It is the battlefield, the moment you pull back from the immediate facts. The 12 agents, the 11 missing, the silence from every direction. You begin to see a larger picture. A far more intricate one, because this isn't just about one failed mission. It isn't just about Israel and India. What happened here feels like part of something bigger. something shaped by years of proxy battles, covert alliances, shadow deals, and quiet betrayals. This wasn't just a disappearance. It may have been a move in a shadow war already underway. South Asia has always been a volatile zone for intelligence operations. The region is like a chessboard where multiple players make their moves in the dark. You have RIW, India's research and analysis wing, with deep local reach and eyes everywhere. You have Mossad, Israel's elite intelligence force, feared and respected worldwide for its reach and precision. Then there's the ISI, Pakistan's intelligence agency, aggressive, unpredictable, with a long history of manipulating regional actors for its own ends. And don't forget the CIA, always watching, always one step removed but never uninvolved. When you consider that all of these forces have had overlapping interests in this region, terrorist networks, arms routes, nuclear materials, cyber warfare, you begin to realize how easily a single mission could cross into the terrain of multiple rival operations. So what if this wasn't just about a single Israeli objective? What if the agents walked into something much larger than what they were briefed for, a trap not necessarily meant for them, but waiting nonetheless? Maybe they were sent to take out a high-value target, unaware that the target was already being monitored by another agency. Maybe they were being watched from the moment they landed, not just by enemies, but by so-called allies. It's a disturbing thought, but in the world of intelligence, it happens more often than people realize. Allies step on each other's toes. They run parallel missions, and sometimes they quietly eliminate teams that get too close to the wrong objective. That kind of conflict doesn't appear in newspapers. It doesn't make diplomatic headlines. But it leaves fingerprints in places like this, where operatives vanish and no one steps forward to claim responsibility or offer clarity. Think about it. If this was simply a case of foreign agents being eliminated by hostile actors, you'd expect retaliation. You'd expect statements, but instead we get silence. That kind of silence only happens when too many powerful interests are involved, none of them wanting the truth out, because exposing the truth would mean admitting what they're doing in the dark. There's also the possibility that these agents weren't just in India for surveillance or even neutralization. They could have been part of a larger intelligence asset extraction. Maybe they were supposed to pull someone out, someone embedded deep within another agency, or someone holding secrets no one wanted leaked. And maybe that extraction collided with another agenda, someone else trying to prevent it. That scenario turns this entire mission into a silent clash between two or more global forces, each willing to do whatever it takes to protect its interests, even if it means erasing a dozen trained operatives. And in that context, the silence from governments becomes understandable, because if you admit something went wrong, you're also admitting you were there in the first place. You're admitting you had your hands in someone else's territory, chasing someone else's secrets. That can't happen in public. That's the kind of admission that starts diplomatic fires. So instead, the narrative is buried, it's rewritten. Buried beneath denials and red tape, reframed as rumor or worse, forgotten entirely, but there's one more angle that's hard to ignore. What if the mission failed not because of opposition, but because it was never supposed to succeed? What if the agents were sent into a situation designed to implode? A sacrificial mission to cover another operation elsewhere, or to draw attention away from something more strategic happening in another part of the world. It sounds unthinkable, but history shows us time and again, in the intelligence world, pawns are used. And even the best trained agents can be sacrificed if the trade-off is considered worth it. This is what the shadow war looks like. It isn't dramatic like the movies, it's quiet, surgical, opaque. Lives are lost not in firefights, but in silence. And what makes it all the more devastating is that the people who vanish are never remembered, never honored. Because they were never officially there to begin with, their loss doesn't come with flags and funerals. It comes with sealed files and blank pages. So when we talk about these 11 agents who disappeared, we're not just talking about a mission gone wrong. We're talking about a larger battle, one fought not with armies, but with secrets, one that's still happening, just out of sight. There's something profoundly unsettling about a story that refuses to end, a story that resists closure, explanation, or justice. The disappearance of 11 Israeli agents in India is one of those stories. It's not just a mystery, it's a silence so deliberate, so tightly wound, that it becomes its own kind of message. We're left with scattered fragments, a mission that no one officially acknowledges, operatives that vanished without a trace, a lone survivor who won't or can't speak, and two governments locked in. A kind of quiet complicity, and then nothing, no answers, no accountability, just questions that deepen the more you ask them. It's in that vacuum that the theories begin, not because people are addicted to conspiracy, but because when no truth is offered, people go looking for the next best thing. Some believe the agents were executed in a coordinated hit by a hostile force. Others are convinced they defected, lured by another intelligence agency with bigger offers, or blackmailed into betrayal. Then there are those who insist the agents never existed at all, that the entire story is a smokescreen for another operation, one that succeeded quietly while the world looked for ghosts. But the truth is, the most dangerous thing about this story isn't the theories. It's the way no one is willing to confirm or deny a single one. Because when a truth this big goes missing, it's not just lost, it's buried deliberately, strategically. Governments know how to keep secrets. Intelligence agencies know how to clean up messes. But what happened here doesn't look like a cleanup. It looks like a controlled demolition, not just of evidence, but of history, and when that happens, it doesn't just affect the operatives involved. It reshapes our understanding of what kind of world we're really living in. We're told that the intelligence community is about protecting people, about ensuring safety through secrecy, but secrecy, when taken to this extreme, stops serving the public and starts serving power. It stops being a shield and becomes a weapon, because this isn't just a story about missing agents. It's a story about how far systems will go to protect themselves, even if it means pretending 11 human lives never existed. Even if it means rewriting the map of what happened, where, and why. In a just world, we would have seen some kind of reckoning. An internal inquiry, a diplomatic fallout, a quiet leak, even a fabricated cover story that at least acknowledged something happened. But here we got none of that, just cold silence, a silence that has now become part of the fabric of the story itself. And that should scare us more than anything else, because when silence becomes the default response to loss, it doesn't just hide the truth, it rots the foundation beneath it. It tells us that certain lives are expendable, certain missions are unspeakable, and certain truths are simply too inconvenient to confront. It tells us that even in the most advanced, most interconnected era in human history, there are still events so sensitive, so volatile, that they can be completely wiped from the record. And yet, the silence isn't total. It never is. People talk in coded language. Files vanish from one archive and appear, redacted, in another. Unofficial briefings are whispered behind doors, and that's where the most unsettling possibility begins to take shape. That some people do know exactly what happened, that the truth hasn't been lost, it's just being kept from us. Because it's too damaging, too revealing, or simply too valuable to be shared. If that's the case, then the story of the missing 11 agents isn't just a tragedy, it's a warning. A signal that beneath the surface of diplomacy and cooperation lies something colder, more ruthless. A machinery that values outcomes over accountability. One that sees people, operatives, civilians, even entire governments, not as human beings, but as variables in a constantly shifting equation. And in that equation, truth is negotiable, reality is flexible, and silence is often the most powerful weapon of all. So maybe we'll never know exactly what happened. Maybe that's the whole point, to leave it vague, to let time do the rest of the erasing. But stories like this don't disappear completely. They linger in rumors, in unspoken gaps in official timelines, in the quiet trauma of those who were close enough to know something, but wise enough not to say anything. And over time, that lingering becomes a kind of resistance, a refusal to let the story die just because the facts have been buried. Because in the end, even if we never find out what really happened to those 11 missing agents, the fact that they vanished without a trace, that their mission, their lives, their disappearance, were all consumed by silence tells us more than any report ever could.